Welcome to episode 1 of the Spotlight Sound series After Dark, the Nightlife Economy. I'm Sam Diamond, the business owner at Spotlight Sound, and although we're based in Essex, we work with venues across the country installing sound systems, lighting, TV screens, all the things that you need in a venue for a good night out. But we've been looking at how these spaces, bars, clubs and venues that make up the nighttime economy are under threat, and we've talked at length recently on TV, radio and in the newspapers about what's going on. Here in Essex, we've seen a higher than average closure rate, with lots of venues in the area being shut down in recent years. We're looking at why is this happening? Is it the rising costs, over-regulation, shifting consumer habits, or maybe a mix of all different things? So across this series, we're speaking to lots of people here in Essex and across the country who are going to help unpack what is really happening out there. I'm pleased to say that joining me today is someone who's been on the front line of this battle for years. Michael Keel, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Hi Mike, great to meet you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for inviting me on. When you say years, it always makes me feel a little bit older than I actually am. Yeah, without
Well,
a
it's
doubt,
great.
really pleased. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you on. I know you're very busy, so especially given what's everything that's been happening right now in the sector, and with a recent budget as well. And I know this area is very close to your heart, having been a venue operator as well. In this area, I think in the east of England, we've lost nearly 40% of our nightclubs, and it's been quite tricky in this area in particular. But you're seeing this across the country and how bad it is right now.
Without a doubt. I mean, we've seen about a third of sort of nightclub as a benchmark in terms of late night economy. It's interesting when you look at the sort of evening, nighttime economy and late night economy. There are small grass shoots of success, but definitely post midnight, we're really sort of seeing a lot of struggle, somewhat because of things like transport infrastructure, somewhat to do with safety, which is the feedback from consumers, but overwhelmingly the economics are just not in our favour. And the recent budget definitely has felt to many like it's the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people out there that thought they could make that business model work. But it's going to be challenging in 2026 without a doubt.
Yeah, and that cost is hitting everywhere, isn't it? Although there are a few pockets of success, but it's across towns, it's across cities, it's all areas that are feeling these costs, isn't it? I mean, you've run clubs in East Anglia, haven't you? I mean, you know what gets lost when a venue closes. It's not just a building, it's not just a venue, is it?
Well, no, I think the one thing that we never talk about is the health benefit. I've written a blog recently was this understated health benefit of nighttime economy as a whole, whether it's people letting loose or that work-life balance. But we also have to consider things like students don't just choose a course when they go to university. They also look at what the cultural landscape looks like. Fintech companies choose where their head offices are because they also have to account for work-life balance for some of the younger and some of the older people working within their workforce. So it also shapes communities. It's really important for physical, mental, and social well-being. So there is a huge plethora of things that is vitally important to communities, and that doesn't even step into the economic impact for a local economy. Whether we talk about jobs or whether we talk about local shops and suppliers that rely heavily on some of these bigger businesses, particularly clubs, casinos, theatres, etc., that feed heavily into that local economy in terms of spend.
Yeah, it's such a bigger picture than just a venue in a town, isn't it? And I know you've really been lobbying the governments for support for this sector, but tough job, right?
Well, it's not easy, and it does feel. I mean, the challenge that you've got with all of this is, definitely with the new government, is you put so many case studies together, the financial impacts, the current state of play. You try and break it down. We do a quarterly report that substantiates how many businesses are out there, where the issues are, but we also do a consumer report so that people understand that they see both sides of the coin, from the community to the businesses that exist. But I think with this government at the moment, they just seem to be very dismissive of hospitality and nighttime economy. I think they came in with a preconceived understanding of what they needed to achieve. I mean, the worrying part is, I'm sure everyone sees this because, we're all smart people. Every time we have a budget, we have a 20 billion pound hole. And what
Yeah,
worries me is after the first one that we filled, I don't understand how they keep coming. Mind you, it does remind you of the road network these days in terms of potholes, the way that our business and finance are working. And someone's got to ask who's managing this fiscal environment if
yeah.
we keep getting these 20 billion pound holes every time we have a budget. So there are concerns out there, and I think people are starting to voice that opinion. And without a doubt, I think come May next year with the local elections, people are going to vote with their feet, which I think you're going to see a huge impact on Labour and potentially an impact on the leadership.
It's yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Because the night hospitality is it's a massive part of our economy. It's not it's right up there with some of the top contributors to the economy. So are they just not listening? Do they not want to hear? Or like you say, they put these things in place, and it all seems to be against hospitality, not for it.
I think the interesting part is, and I mean, if you just take, say, we talk about nighttime economy and hospitality sort of in the same breath. I mean, nighttime economy is worth 153 billion pounds in terms of turnover, 2.11 million people employed.
Mm,
That's bigger than automotive, bigger than beauty, bigger than fashion. So, we deserve a seat at the table. We're
yeah,
also a really important part of footfall, visitor economy. All the figures suggest it's over 300 million people come into the UK for nightlife. Whether we talk about nightclubs or whether we talk about theatre or food, we're an important sort of space for people to come and visit. And I think what we are at the moment, and I think what I see, which is consistent, is we're undervalued. We are
yeah,
seen as somewhat burdensome. And I think that feeds into the narrative. If you remember in the late 90s, we saw a late 80s, the freedom to dance movement, where the Conservative Party tried to quash the hours that were operated. I think what they're doing at the moment is doing a similar job, but they're doing it subversively in a way that, through policy has really impacted our industry. And I think we've got to at some point fight back. And that's a decision for the industry to make, and definitely something that we would really support, because I think at the moment we're in a critical position moving into 26.
yeah. It's not. It's just about saving businesses. It's the whole ecosystem. It's everything around it. It's such a big part, such a big player. And I think actually it was saying that the changing culture of going out, what people are interested in doing these days, that's definitely changed a big amount since, like you say, since like the late 80s and 90s, where that's come to today. And we're now got to look at different offerings, more experience led, and different things like that for people to go out and enjoy these days.
Well, I think the interesting part is things like competitive socializing has become a thing, but I think some of that is down to things like the square deal. People don't want to go out and put their night out on a credit card, wake up in the morning with a credit card bill and hide it from your other half sort of
Yeah,
moment. So I think the one thing that we're seeing is an expansive sort of an expansion of the operating hours. So, when we talk about soft clubbing, listening parties, when we talk about day parties, pre-midnight club events, all of these things are starting to set themselves up, not only because of the economic position, but also because of the infrastructure. We know full well that people feel less safe after midnight. We know there's not as many police around because they're tucked up early doors. We also know that post 11:30 midnight, getting home is an absolute nightmare without, potentially a private hire vehicle, which is now being taxed another 20%
yeah,
because it's, the VAT is being added. And the interesting part is buses and trains don't pay VAT, but they don't fulfill that requirement post midnight. So I also think that we've got an issue with licensing, although we've got the reform coming through, it's guidance at the moment. That really needs to be robustly embedded into what we do. So I think the challenge that we have is on several planes. I think we've got the environmental situation between licensing, safety and transport, but then we've got the bigger one, which is the economics. At the moment, we're just unfairly taxed, and that's where the situation is. So,
yeah.
you know,
It,
uh,
there's so many
it,
different things at play, isn't there? And they're all it's creating this sort of perfect storm, isn't it, for some of these operators that you just can't, yeah, we just can't seem to get past at the minute. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle.
well, there's this. I mean, yesterday we saw the 800 million pounds spent to get young people back into work, whereas a year ago we got a budget out that increased national insurance contribution thresholds for employers, which took a load of people out of work. So,
Yeah,
my view on press was spend the 800 million on supporting the industry, and the industry will do the job for you. So the
yeah.
challenge that we have with all of this is it seems like a government in chaos, almost a little bit of a headless chicken in many respects. And the way that we seem like things are transpiring, whether you talk about apprenticeships, which in normal circumstances would be really positive, we're also seeing the sort of backtracking on employment rights bills. We're talking about Martin's Law coming in. We've
Mm.
got so many other policy decisions that are being made, which are going to impact us, as well as those fiscal decisions, which have, without a doubt, going to really sort of pay dividend for government in April. But it's going to put a lot of pressure on businesses. And I think people are going to have to make a decision come January, because their VAT bills and their landlord quarters are going to be due, and they're really going to be thinking, can I sustain this? At what point do I decide that I can't go on?
Yeah, and we've got business rates changes coming as well, haven't we? Which is another big one. There was kind of hopeful that some reform there would help some of the operators, but actually it's gone the other way. A lot of operators' bills are actually going up massively.
Well, we've seen that. I mean, the challenge is reevaluation is the thing that could. I mean, we're still lobbying to suggest that that modelling is wrong. I
Mm.
really don't know. I saw some figures earlier today that said that Harrods has reduced its business rates bill by 1.1 million to
Yes.
8.7 million,
Seen it.
and Selfridges have reduced it by 662,000 to 8.6 million, whereas most pubs, bars, restaurants, etc., have seen an average of about 76% increase. So the reality is we're in a situation where we're subsidizing the big warehouses. Things like Amazon are not paying much more, and they're quite happy to take that on the chin. And where we
Mm.
talked about making sure that we were looking after pubs, bars, and restaurants and those small, medium enterprise businesses, we're crippling them to support these bigger industries, which is, definitely not pro growth and definitely not supporting the smaller business amongst these communities, especially ones that really shape the cultural landscape of the UK and what we're known for. So it's worrying
Yeah.
times for many, I'm sure.
It is worrying times. Yeah, we see this out and about the venues and some of the spaces that we've installed and looked after over the years. They're closing at a rate of knots, and it is all because of these. Not one factor in particular. It's all these things combined that are causing the problems. But I mean, is there some hope you can see? Have we got any good things coming that are gonna mean that we can keep these venues going?
I think the one thing that we've got to do is just take our own future into our hands. I mean, we're lobbying hard for the national insurance contribution to be reversed. We're
Yeah.
pushing hard for business rates to be reconsidered in terms of that modelling, because I think the reevaluation has definitely taken us off guard. Without that, where we thought that we were going to get a longer term sort of better position in terms of the multiplier, the withdrawal of the 40% has hit us very hard. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The 4.3 billion in terms of that transitional fund will help for a very short period of time, but it still doesn't avoid the ultimate position, which is higher cost. I think the
Mm.
challenge that we have is we've got to really understand that there is a very different operating financial model for pubs, bars, restaurants, clubs. And what we've really got to do is reevaluate it, really work together, talk about things like procurement, talk about collective money saving proposition, and still lobby very hard for the government to reduce that sort of burden. VAT is still heavily on the agenda. We've got to look
Yeah.
after. We've got to see the most vulnerable businesses as an opportunity, because 70% of the industry is made up of SMEs. So for us, a lot of the work that we did was about NIC contribution for SMEs, a lot of work around business rates proposition for SMEs, but that's not worked in the favour. And I still believe wholeheartedly that the Chancellor is shocked by the kickback by the industry, because I believe that modelling is wrong, and I think it needs to be revisited. And I think early next year, the figures are going to be very telling, and that is going to decide the future for the Chancellor and the Prime Minister moving forward. Because I don't think the Labour can win an election under the current regime, and there is a concern that it is somewhat of a lost some of its direction, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's and the sad thing, I think the want is still there by the consumer to go out and do it. Although the culture, although we've shifted, it's not gone. People still want to go out. We need to socialize as humans. We need to have that connection. And really, it's just the government kicking the industry. And if we can just give it that bit of support, the want and the need is there. It's a thriving industry when supported well.
The desire to go out has never ever slowed. The
No.
reality is the cost of daily living is impacted the frequency, the dwell time, and the spend. That's as simple as it gets. We have to work hard to make things more accessible. We have to make sure, we're seeing a lot more people now looking at affordable clubbing and affordable access to businesses, but there's a balance here, whether it's
Yeah.
an increase in human resource or whether it's an increase in supply chain. We've got to accommodate for it. The only way that we can change it is by increasing the volume and lowering the cost and still retaining some level of margin. But, I think the challenge that we have there is it's a dual-pronged attack. We need to refine what we do as an operating model. We need to make sure that the government understands the crippling position it's put industry in, but we also need to encourage people to come back out and have that human connection that I think has been really deterred off the back of that digital economy, which is a worry. And that's something that people are
Yeah.
starting to recognize now more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we could talk for hours about this. I think this is a great, it's a great. So there's so much here that we could delve into. But I think all we can do is we keep raising the importance of the nightlife economy and people voting with their feet. Really, I think in terms of getting out to these places and the change we need to come, don't they? So yeah, that's great. Brilliant. Yeah, Mike Kill, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Associations. Thanks very much for joining me today. It's been great to chat.
Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate it.